from the Clinton Correctional Facility.
These men are considered armed.
Hundreds of officers on a massive manhunt.
They are killers. They are murderers.
Tonight on 2020 Manhunt. From New York to Mexico, it is the summer of prison escapes.
All right, we're inside the El Chapo tunnel.
And we're taking you dead center.
You're really starting with two people who have no trail. It's like chasing a ghost.
23 days and nights of terror with two cold-hearted killers on the loose.
If you wanted to take a picture of the devil, that's the face that you would see.
Richard Matt and David Sweat, desperate convicts who don't feel pain, literally.
He's a freaking crazy lunatic maniac.
And don't mind causing it.
He's a monster. There's some sort of chemical imbalance in his head.
And just this week, Sweat speaking out. All new details, planning their escape for months. A crash diet to fit through a tiny tunnel. Hacksaws smuggled in ground beef to dig their way out of a fortress.
You look at that and you say, how did this happen? How did this happen in this facility?
Could it have been by seducing a prison guard to help them escape?
When you're hearing her tell investigators, I had sex with Matt, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking, Joyce Mitchell, what are you thinking?
Tonight, our correspondents out in the field and in the forest.
Because they are deep in it, and it's total darkness what they've got.
Retracing the desperate steps of the killers with the men who led the charge.
He's yelling. Stop.
Yelling, come out.
Chilling new details you've never heard until now.
Matt's attitude was, we have to kill or rob somebody, that's what we should do.
In the real locations you've never seen until now. The campsite hideout in the woods.
So that changed everything, finding their DNA in this cabin.
How it all played out step by step.
Kept the pressure all the way from the Canadian border south.
And the final dramatic showdown for the high-stakes capture of David Sweat.
Cook knew immediately, I've got the right guy. This is Sweat. It's on.
It's on. You're about to see how those words will lead to a final shootout, the end of a white-knuckle 23-day manhunt. But in many ways, that will just be the start of what we are still piecing together about that daring escape.
In fact, call it the summer of prison escapes, the notorious El Chapo, the tunnel right underneath his shower. But we're going to start with that other prison right here in America, an escape right out of Shawshank Redemption, practicing for months in the middle of the night. Here's Gio Benitez.
It's the first June weekend in the scenic Adirondacks region of New York, a summer playground. But this relaxing Saturday is about to become an overtime workday for Major Charles Guest of the New York State Police.
I was sound asleep. I got a phone call at about 6:06 a.m.
Guest heads to Dannemora, a one-horse town whose lifeblood is one mammoth building, the hulking Clinton Correctional Facility. Outside, 5,000 residents. Inside, 3,000 prisoners. And overnight, that population has just been lowered by 2.
They had 2 unaccounted for inmates at this point, which is a problem in and of itself. A total breach had been made of the perimeter, so we knew that the unaccounted for prisoners had become 2 escapees at large.
Finding the men will be Major Guest's problem. Keeping the local community safe, that's the job of Clinton County Sheriff David Favreau.
Didn't believe it, though.
Really?
No. My response to the text was, this isn't funny on a Saturday morning.
It's no joke. 2 convicted murderers have escaped from Clinton, a legendary prison where the worst of the worst are dispatched.
I'm not doing time.
In the past, there were the likes of notorious gangster Lucky Luciano, seen here portrayed in Boardwalk Empire.
Let him spill the beans.
And until a few hours ago, there were 2 modern-day depraved criminals, Richard Matt, who murdered and mutilated his former boss, and David Sweat, a heartless cop killer. Governor Andrew Cuomo rushes to the scene, worried nobody's busted out of Clinton in 100 years. Officials show the governor the trail of the escape.
It was elaborate, it was sophisticated, it encompassed drilling through steel walls and steel pipes, so this was not easily accomplished.
We now know the breakout has been months in the making. Way back in January, David Sweat makes a New Year's resolution to relocate. He begins sawing through the walls of his cell using a smuggled hacksaw blade.
All they used was the hacksaw blades to get out, so that would make sense on the length of time that it took them to do it.
By February, he has methodically cut through the steel wall of his cell, 3/8 of an inch thick, and continues carving through the wall of his next-door neighbor, too, Richard Matt.
Were they clean holes?
They were. There's an air duct vent in each of these cells. They cut out around the air duct, removed it, and they're large enough for a person the size of Matt or Sweat to get through.
And so behind those cells, there's some sort of corridor, right? A catwalk.
Yeah, it's a catwalk that goes through the length of the back of the cells, and there are 4 different tiers.
Night after night, after guards finish bed checks, Sweat freely wanders those catwalks, descending into the bowels of the prison. He finds a hammer a workman left behind and uses it to knock through a brick wall, discovering on the other side a 24-inch heating pipe which leads underneath the 30-foot prison wall. The plan? Open the pipe and crawl to freedom, just like Tim Robbins' character in The Shawshank Redemption. Sweat and Matt joke that though it took Robbins 20 years in the movie, they will only need 10. As it turns out, it will be far less.
Sweat was down there multiple nights. And he did most of the work. And they cut through the pipes. They were just persistent.
And fastidious, too. A fan hooked up to electricity in the tunnel keeps him from getting too sweaty. A second set of clothes from getting too dusty while cutting through that heating pipe. By May, as the weather warms, the blistering steam is shut off. Meanwhile, the stocky Matt goes on a crash diet, so he's skinny enough to slither through their escape route.
To get through the pipe, which was less than 2 feet in diameter, and to get through the wall that they broke, he had to lose weight. And even then, Sweat says he had difficulty getting through.
By that night in June, it's all systems go. They execute their plan to perfection. They come out of the pipe near a manhole cover and emerge on the street a block from the prison. They leave behind a twisted calling card, this tiny note. Have a nice day.
And there's that taunting message they left behind. Have a nice day.
It's an insult, obviously, to us.
And where will the killers go? The prison is located in the densely wooded, extreme northeast corner of New York State. The Canadian border is less than 20 miles away. Vermont is a short boat ride across Lake Champlain. As Sheriff Favreau drives through town, things are still quiet.
You're in a residential area, a lot of homes very close together. Most of these people right here worked at the prison, people totally unsuspected, and preparing for a beautiful weekend, not really knowing what was going on.
But now the word starts spreading, automated phone calls throughout the area.
This is an important message from the New York State Police. The search continues for 2 men who escaped from the Clinton Correctional Facility. Police are reminding residents in the area to remain on alert.
Hundreds of officers now on a massive manhunt.
The search heating up. The 2 are still on the loose.
Remain at large.
Armed and dangerous.
They are very dangerous.
As people hear the news, amazement turns to fear.
I almost vomited. That's how scared I am.
We have a bunch of property back here with some woods, and it just freaks me out that they could be running around back there.
But for one employee of the prison, a woman named Joyce Mitchell, there was a special kind of fear. You'll see why very soon.
We're leaving no stone unturned. They could be literally anywhere.
As the search goes into high gear, Major Guest is in command.
My goal was to assemble literally the best team to assist me in our overarching objective of capturing these guys and returning them to the facility.
Investigators are searching these dense woods by ground and by air, launching helicopters to get that critical bird's eye view, all to find those prisoners. But the bad guys have a head start in those very thick woods.
6 or 7 hours, they could be on New Jersey, getting near Virginia. They could be way out west.
Stay with your partner, 2-man team.
And make no mistake,
Richard Matt is the devil.
These are very, very bad guys.
Extremely violent.
Who is David Sweat? Is he a monster?
Yes.
It's a very dangerous situation.
Stay with us. In the movie The Shawshank Redemption, the hero is a wrongly convicted man who escaped from prison. In Real life, though,
The hunt for two escaped prisoners.
Roger, 305.
two guilty and very correctly convicted men are on the loose.
They're following more than 150 leads.
At first, these mugshots are pretty much the only image for hundreds of searchers and thousands of fearful residents in upstate New York to focus on. Until this.
This is my friend Ricky Matt right here. He's a freaking crazy lunatic maniac.
A chilling video surfaces, recorded in 1997. That's one of the two escapees, a younger, skinnier, but just as twisted Richard Matt, known then as Ricky.
South American blowgun. This is the South American blowgun.
Recorded on Super 8 film, an acquaintance demonstrating a blowgun by firing it at Matt.
Ricky with a smile. Here we go. We're about to shoot the dart into Ricky's arm.
Just listen to what he says.
We're gonna dip these in AIDS blood, and we'll put a patent on them. We'll sell them as deadly weapons. What do you think?
The camera rolls as the dart goes right into Matt's arm.
Went in there, started to come out there.
He doesn't even flinch.
He's so good at conning people. God.
In one of life's countless contradictions, Matt displays talent as an artist growing up in suburban Buffalo. This is some of his later work, but apparently his true calling was violent crime.
This man has no heart, no soul to do this to another human being.
Just months after this tape was shot, retired police captain Gabriel DiBernardo would be investigating Matt for murder.
Ah, disgusting.
Matt was a guy who was in trouble with law enforcement from the time he was a teenager.
But despite his troubles, young Ricky seemed to have no trouble with the ladies.
Ricky had girls that were gorgeous.
He settled down with this woman, V. Harris. Today, she suffers from a debilitating illness, but back then, she suffered from Matt's violent outbursts.
Yeah, he had broken ribs, broken feet, broken toes. It was bad.
V forgives Matt, though, because in their roughly 18 months together, he gave her a son, Nicholas.
My mom wanted to make sure I knew who he was then, so if anyone had said something to me in the future, I wouldn't be caught off guard and not know what they're talking about.
Soon, Dad would give everybody something to talk about.
Richard Matt is the devil.
Lee Bates met Richard Matt at, where else? A strip club. Soon Ricky convinced him to join in a plot to rob William Rickerson, a local businessman who'd made the mistake of briefly giving Matt a job. Like many of Matt's criminal enterprises, what the plan lacked in sophistication, it made up for in brutality.
Mr. Rickerson looked up at Rick, and Rick turned around and punched him right in the face.
Bates says Matt tortured the 76-year-old man, sticking a knife sharpener into his ear at one point, then locked him in a car trunk and drove aimlessly for 27 hours.
At different points, he'd have me pull over. I'd have to get out of the car with him. He'd open the trunk, and he would beat Mr. Rickerson.
Each time they opened the trunk, it got worse.
He snapped his fingers all the way back and grabbing a hold of his head and snapping it. There was a pop.
You don't tell Richard Matt he can't have what he wants.
Matt dismembered the body and threw it in a river. After all that, the big score? Some rings, a couple of credit cards, and not even $100 in cash. Meantime, about 200 miles away, near Binghamton, New York, David Sweat had launched his own criminal career.
You know, he did larcenies here, burglaries.
Unlike his future partner, Sweat is more of a thinking man's thug.
It seemed like every crime that he was involved with involved making lists and maps and planning.
Sweat's transition from heist to homicide took place on July 4th, 2002.
This must have been a crime that just shook this community.
It did, because it was so brutal.
Sweat and his cousin steal some firearms and pull into this parking lot to move the stolen weapons from one car to another.
The two vehicles that he observed were parked over there, facing that direction.
That's when Deputy Kevin Tarsia happens to drive by.
When they saw him coming, they jumped out of the vehicles and hid. Well, they shoot him, and they just mow him right down.
Deputy Tarsia is hit 15 times, but the sheriff says he wasn't dead yet, so Sweat makes sure by driving over him.
I have never forgotten Kevin, and I never will. Kevin was a great man. This is of SWAT team when Kev was on the SWAT team.
Christiane Ciccone-Storman was engaged to Kevin Tarsia. She's neither forgiven nor forgotten his killer.
He's a monster. There's some sort of chemical imbalance in his head. I wanted him to feel some pain.
Sweat pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. He's sent to the Clinton Correctional Facility in 2003. A few years later, Mad Dog Richard Matt, who had finally been brought to justice himself, joins him. The two callous killers become buddies inside the prison in Dannemora, New York. Despite their various social pathologies, they are still capable of social charm, a charm prosecutors say they would leverage quite effectively with a woman who worked in that prison, a woman who would be the key to their escape, a woman named Joyce Mitchell.
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking, Joyce Mitchell, what are you thinking?
Stay with us.
.2020's Manhunt continues. Once again, Gio Benitez.
Even in a bleak place like the Clinton Correctional Facility, there are ways to make doing hard time more soft. Well-behaved prisoners can earn a place in the so-called honor block. This former inmate knows.
The honor block, you're allowed out of your cell majority of the day.
This former guard, too.
They have what they call rec time on the flats, which is the lower level, where they can get out, watch TV. They have cooking privileges.
And guess who weaseled their way to those privileges? Two role model inmates named Richard Matt and David Sweat, who earned honor block status and jobs at the prison's tailor shop.
Honor block for killers? There's no honor among killers. Oh, disgusting.
He's a murderer. He shouldn't have these privileges.
According to prosecutors, a fateful bromance was building and a plot was hatching. A plot requiring the recruitment of an unlikely accomplice, that woman named Joyce Mitchell.
Who is Joyce Mitchell?
Joyce Mitchell's a middle-aged woman, a mother, a wife.
And a civilian worker at that honor block tailor shop, married to another worker named Lyle.
She had been working there for a period of time prior to her contact with Sweat and Matt.
Wiley says as Sweat and Matt walked back and forth to that tailor shop, the two regularly stumbled over a sort of speed bump, eventually realizing that underneath ran a heat pipe. If only they could crawl through it, they were home free.
Every day they had this layout of their, potential escape route that they were looking at.
Someone should have suspected Matt might try to escape. He'd done it before.
He broke out of the Erie County Correctional Facility.
He reportedly scaled the jail's barbed wire fence. Last time, he went over the wall. Prosecutors claim this time, he's planning to go under. The brazen one joining up with Sweat, the master schemer, the one who drew maps and lists for his every crime.
My guess would be that David is the operations guy.
But according to prosecutors, this operation would need one smooth operator. Ricky Matt, the natural ladies' man, takes his relationship with Joyce Mitchell to another level. He gives Joyce some of his paintings, similar to these celebrity portraits. Then he gives her something else.
What was happening in that tailor shop?
There's allegations of sexual contact. I can see how a friendship could evolve, but to go to the extent of having sexual contact, to me, is unimaginable.
Even more disturbing to visualize than a lockdown lovin' with these two, Wiley says Matt talks Mitchell into helping out with the budding escape plot.
The three of them were gonna run off. She was gonna have a life with either Matt or Sweat and leave her family, leave her husband, leave her son.
The deal was not something for nothing. Wiley claims in exchange for a fun-filled future on the run with convicted killers, Mitchell had to smuggle in the tools they'd need to escape.
I'm sure once they realized that they could manipulate Joyce into bringing in the tools, that was the first step.
What did she give them?
Hacksaw blades, drill bits, a punch tool, a couple pairs of eyeglasses that have lights on them. She later then provided batteries for those lights.
But Wiley claims she had help. a guard on their unit named Gene Palmer, who brought ground beef to the prisoners with the critical saw blades hidden inside.
He was a cool officer, down to earth. I don't think he had any knowledge about what was in that meat.
Palmer says he had no idea, but admits he cut corners other times, helping Matt and Sweat in exchange for inside information on other prisoners. Now properly equipped, Wiley says Sweat begins gnawing through the walls of Clinton Prison like a rat through rope. After months of nocturnal labor, it's Friday, June 5th. In the tailor shop that day, Matt allegedly tells Joyce the time has come.
Told Joyce, this is the day we're breaking out. Meet us at the power plant at midnight.
Wiley says Matt gives her pills to sedate her husband Lyle so she can make her getaway. According to Wiley, about 10:30 that night, bed check. The inmates are all present and accounted for. Lights go off.
No one has ever escaped from Alcatraz.
But it's the oldest inmate trick in the book, stuffing the bed to make it appear they're sleeping. You'd think guards would have seen countless movies like Escape from Alcatraz. But according to prosecutors, the trick works, and one of the most daring escapes from prison ever attempted is underway. And off they go, sliding past their cell walls, running down the catwalks, squeezing through the holes they'd carved in the wall and into the pipes, slithering 400 feet under the wall and emerging up via that manhole at about 11:45. Joyce is supposed to meet them in a getaway car, but the perfect plot hits its first snag. She doesn't show up. Prosecutors guess her conscience has compelled her to back out.
They had total faith that she was going to pick them up at the manhole at midnight, and when she got cold feet and didn't show up, they had to regroup. They had no plan.
Just then, these two neighborhood residents are pulling up to their house on the block.
And what do you see?
We see a couple of guys walking across the road into my backyard. So I go look at him and I see him. I ask him, "What the hell are you doing in my yard?" He was like, "Sorry, I didn't know where I was. I'm on the wrong street."
It's all falling apart. According to prosecutors, true to form, Matt starts to freak out, but Sweat stays level-headed and convinces Matt to follow him into the woods. They duck into the darkness and disappear.
I had a horrible feeling the whole time. They had absolutely nothing to lose. 2 confirmed killers with at least 3 bodies between them.
In the meantime, Joyce checks into a local hospital, suffering from a panic attack.
So let's go 4, 3, 2, 1.
The next morning, as the news breaks, Major Guess organizes the massive manhunt. 1,600 members of law enforcement from 11 different agencies all over the country. In the air, high-tech gadgetry. On the ground, old-fashioned house-to-house searching.
You had to keep it in perspective so that you didn't become overwhelmed by the enormity of the task at hand.
The terrain is daunting, acre after acre of thick, deep woods.
And this is nothing. No, this is an easier part of the terrain compared to what they've actually had to go through. You could run into a bear's den any place. You could run into multiple wild animals.
Bad weather rolls in, along with an avalanche of leads. Cops are chasing more than 2,500 false alarms and reported sightings from Canada to Mexico. But what really concerns Sheriff Favreau is this.
So this is it. This is what you found in the house.
What if the killers were to stumble into a cache of weapons?
28 long arms, over a dozen knives, and 2 boxes of ammunition.
The woods are dotted with unlocked hunting cabins, almost all fully stocked with every provision a runaway killer might want. Food, clothing, and guns. Lots of guns.
That would have been our biggest nightmare.
As the search goes into high gear, so does the investigation into the escape. From the start, officials felt it was obvious that someone on the inside helped the 2 jailbirds fly away.
They needed power tools to accomplish this. How did they get the power tools? From who?
And it's not long before prosecutors have uncovered what they call Joyce Mitchell's interesting approach to inmate relations.
Prison officials looked into whether Mitchell had a relationship with David Sweat.
Headline writers are having a field day. Shaw Skank redemption. There's the allegations of illicit sex and early reports that Sweat and Matt may have planned to kill Joyce's husband, Lyle.
What do you make of the reports that she was trying to have you killed?
As the saga stretches from days to weeks, Joyce Mitchell and Gene Palmer are both arrested.
Joyce Mitchell's attorney entered a not guilty plea.
And while they deny all charges, the irony is profound. The two prison workers are facing time themselves, and the two prisoners remain as free as the wind. Stay with us.
When Manhunt returns, for the first time on camera, the unlocked cabin where the hunt heats up.
And you're just trying to flush them out.
And how a bottle of booze and a single cough in the woods blow their cover. Next. 2020 continues with Manhunt. Here now, Lindsay Janis.
After 15 frustrating days of false leads and dead ends, state police have nothing but egg on their face in their quest to bring Richard Matt and David Sweat to justice.
Really rocky.
But now, a huge break in the case, and it happens near the tiny hamlet of Owl's Head, at a location so remote we had to travel by ATV to reach it.
There it is.
At the end of the trail, one of those Adirondack hunting cabins that are often left unlocked and stocked with food, supplies, even booze. Manna from heaven for an escaped con on the lam. Owner John Stockwell and his black lab Dolly were checking up on the cabin when they saw signs of unwanted activity.
And challenged any of the occupants by saying, who's in there? You better come out. Who's in there? You need to come out now. Whoever was on the back deck fled down the bank, and he could tell that because he could hear the crashing through the brush.
Inside, Stockwell finds more signs that something's amiss. A misplaced coffee pot, a missing shotgun that had been hidden between two mattresses, a map ripped off the wall. Stockwell quickly alerts authorities, who find more evidence that Sweat is the careful criminal and Matt the wild card.
Sweat had wanted to leave. Matt's position was no sense in leaving just yet. And if somebody intrudes upon our occupancy at the cabin, you know, frankly, we're ready to deal with them.
We now have a shotgun.
Yep, we could kill them, we could take them hostage. Sweat prevailed with the logic of let's get out of here.
But in their mad rush to flee the scene, hardened criminal Matt acts more like a bumbling amateur, leaving even more vital clues behind.
They're getting out of Dodge as fast as they can. Items of interest that we recovered fall out of Matt's pack. Toothpaste, toothbrush, razor, those kind of personal grooming items, which immediately were a hit on DNA within the next 24 hours.
That must have been a good feeling.
It was. It helped us sharpen our focus and certainly boosted the morale of everyone involved.
Law enforcement immediately swarmed the area like ticks on a bloodhound. But this prey is wily. Police find discarded pepper shakers on the trail. Signs of an old trick straight out of Cool Hand Luke.
They were using pepper shakers to try to throw our dogs off, our canine. And, you know, to some extent, it looks like that may have worked.
These are smart guys.
Yes, especially Sweat. Sweat seemed to be the mastermind.
And authorities later learned that Sweat had gotten fed up with his increasingly unstable partner in crime. Now Sweat cold-bloodedly decides to ditch his hot-blooded buddy.
Sweat knew that Matt was out of shape. Any of these cabins where he could find alcohol, he would drink and get drunk. As his frustration level grew, he talked increasingly about harming members of the public or law enforcement, and Sweat really apparently wanted no part of that.
Meanwhile, here at Titus Mountain, investigators relocate their command center to this ski resort that sits right next to that cabin with the incriminating evidence, and they dramatically tighten the search perimeter.
And you're just trying to flush them out at this point.
First thing is containment. If you can't attempt to contain them, then they're going to slip through it.
Then, on day 21 of the manhunt, just 11 miles away from the Owl's Head cabin, there's another huge development at a different hunting cabin near Malone, New York. This is the notorious cabin that everyone's talking about, and 2020 gets exclusive access. Inside, it's filled with hunting souvenirs and other odds and ends. But on that fateful day, the sharp-eyed cabin owner detects this clear tip-off that the liquor-loving Matt had come calling.
He noticed a bottle of grape gin sitting here on the counter, and some of it was actually spilled on the Formica. Probably time to call the state police.
And you were here in moments, because your command center is just 10 minutes away.
Correct. We deployed people immediately to this.
Even as investigators are interviewing the cabin owner, they hear shots ring out nearby. It turns out Matt, as always operating with more bravado than brains, had fired shots at a passing vehicle on Route 30 in a vain attempt to carjack it. Police descend on the area like an invading army. Right in the thick of things, resident John Shoda, a photographer who captures a scene resembling a military operation.
They told me to get in the house, but I said no. Just a myriad of trucks and vehicles and helicopters, dogs, and teams of soldiers and camouflage.
By now, Matt has moved from that cabin to a deserted camper about 75 yards away. With the noose quickly tightening, Matt decides to hole up here for a spell.
You can see there's a little bit of food in the cupboard.
Yep, food. When you're on the run for that long, anything's food.
Eventually, Matt leaves the camper and hunkers down here in the woods, a swamp and a ravine behind him. State police lining the road in front of him. He points that 20-gauge shotgun towards them when suddenly he coughs, betraying his position.
And then they communicate that cough to the Border Patrol National Tactical Team that's actually in the wood line.
They're coming up from behind where Matt is just here.
Correct.
A Border Patrol agent levels his M4 assault rifle at Matt and twice orders him to drop his shotgun.
The Border Patrol agent engaged inmate Matt at this location because Matt failed to comply with his instructions. At least 3 rounds struck inmate Matt in the head.
This photo, obtained by WIVB TV, shows the violent end to a violent life. After 21 days, Richard Matt has finally been brought to justice.
Developing news from upstate New York, one escaped killer dead.
Killed by the Border Patrol.
Were you disappointed that he wasn't taken alive?
I was gratified that we had stopped one of them, but my immediate thought, frankly, was, where's the other inmate?
Where's Sweat?
Where's Sweat?
Next, a race to the border.
Kept the pressure all the way from the Canadian border south.
Maps out, guns drawn, and a final run through an alfalfa field. How will it end?
If Sweat makes that wood line, he's gone.
When Manhunt returns.
Day 21. 3 shots ring out in the woods. And for residents of the region, a deep but fleeting sigh of relief.
When they caught Matt up there, I said, well, good, we're safe, because they're going to get Sweat. But then after 2 days, when they didn't get Sweat, I went, oh, no.
Denise Yando, Tom McDonald, and their dog Shasta live on a peaceful farm here in Constable, New York, some 40 miles northwest of those prison walls. That's outside the primary search perimeter. But ever since Matt and Sweat emerged from that manhole, these two have been on pins and needles.
You're thinking it's logical that they could be headed this way.
That's correct. Very logical.
Logical, because on their property sits a 14.5-acre alfalfa field.
He had just cut it.
Just past that tree line, Canada.
Very close to the border. It's only about 1.5 miles.
Major Guess is also thinking Sweat's headed to the border and mobilizes troops there.
There wasn't a second to rest because you thought you were right on Sweat as well at that point.
Correct.
But as we now know, Sweat is a worthy adversary. In fact, he'd prepared by reading Navy SEAL manuals in the prison library. Now equipped with supplies from those hunting cabins,
he had granola bars, he had Pop-Tarts, he had water.
He's traveling at night, avoiding locals, surviving in the wilderness, even shaving his face so he looks different than this police sketch.
It's like chasing a ghost.
Once again, the trail goes cold. Back at Titus Mountain, Guess continues to plot out the search area.
We kept the pressure all the way from the Canadian border south.
His troops move down from the border and end up right in Constable. And Major Guess had guessed correctly. Sweat was there too. At one point, hiding in a hunting stand like this one, in a tree above them.
He had secreted himself in a hide site, a deer stand here in the town of Constable for 2 nights.
Law enforcement searching below him while he was up in this tree stand.
Correct.
Day 23. A squad car cruises past Bob and Denise's farmstead.
So Sergeant Cook is driving along this road,
As he's doing his job patrolling down the Coveytown Road here, behind us,
Sergeant Jay Cook, a local trooper out on patrol, spots someone on the road.
He sees Sweat right about here.
he does, right here.
Sweat had essentially slipped through that first perimeter. I know it was a loose perimeter, but he was a mile and a half from Canada.
Yes.
But this crafty con got lazy. Rather than trekking through the protective woods, he's taken a shortcut on a public road in broad daylight.
He became a little more desperate as he saw the continued pressure of state police and law enforcement and took the chance and the risk of moving during the daylight because I think he could smell freedom 2 miles away.
Freedom, straight through Bob and Denise's freshly cut alfalfa field, right where he's headed when Cook comes rolling up.
By that point, Sweat had actually moved into the alfalfa field by a good 20 to 25 yards. Sergeant Cook engages in conversation, says, "Hey, stop." And Sweat says, "No, I'm good." Sweat kind of did a hand motion like this, framing his face as if to say, "What? It's not me," you know, kind of like an unsolicited denial.
But Sweat was clean shaven at this point.
Correct.
So he actually thought he could get away with it.
And I think that's exactly why he made the facial gesture that he made, like, "No, you got the wrong guy." But Cook knew immediately, "I've got the right guy. This is Sweat. It's on."
Suddenly, it's a foot chase.
Bear in mind that Sweat had a good 25-yard head start on Sergeant Cook. Right about this distance is the head start that Sweat has. You're Sergeant Cook at that location.
And Cook's yelling at Sweat at this point, saying, "I'm going to shoot you if you don't stop."
Correct. Sergeant Cook has his gun drawn at this point. He's running full speed.
So Cook sees that thick forest and knows he has to take Sweat out before he gets there.
Exactly. Cook's alone, and if Sweat makes that wood line, he's gone. He has to set himself here, takes a deep breath.
Cook, an expert marksman, ends the manhunt with 2 shots.
To which Sweat dropped immediately.
We're on a page for the rest of constable personnel to stage at the station.
Troopers descend on the field.
We saw police cars going by like crazy, and then our neighbors pulled in and said to us, "You know your hayfield's full of police?"
How does it feel to know that one of these escaped murderers was captured on your property?
Kind of shocking.
Shocking.
It was like, holy Moses, I had to think about this for a while.
Give me an ambulance to stage at my station.
Despite suffering a collapsed lung, David Sweat has enough breath to tell his story. Almost immediately, he starts spilling.
And what did Sweat say to them? Anything?
He just said he was trying to essentially make it to freedom.
Sweat gets medical treatment. Tonight, he's alone with his thoughts in solitary confinement at the 5 Points Correctional Facility on the other side of the state. And for Major Guess, the weight finally off his shoulders.
I did take time to savor that moment, knowing that the guy who made the apprehension was safe. That was a huge relief, knowing we had 2 of them now out of the public. Sergeant Cook did his job. He ended 23-day nightmare for citizens of the state of New York, and he ended it safely.
Breaking news. The massive manhunt finally over after a 3-week intensive search.
We're safe. Our community is safe. We appreciate everything they did. That everyone can take a collective sigh of relief.
Could you have thought of a better conclusion?
No, you know, we always said it would be a